You know that feeling, right? When you're maybe learning something online, like math or code,
Yeah.
and the system adapts, and 1 minute you're totally getting it, feeling great, making
Like a
progress.
confidence boost.
Exactly. And then the next minute, wham!
Mm.
You hit this really hard problem, feel completely stuck, maybe kind of frustrated.
Oh, absolutely. That sudden drop.
What is actually going on in your head then? You know, how do the feelings, the motivation, the way you think about it, and this smart system all mix together?
It's such a crucial question, isn't it? It goes way beyond just like the right answers. It's about that whole dynamic internal experience colliding with the technology.
Yeah, we've got a source for our deep dive today that tackles exactly that. It's a research paper called Simulating the Dynamics of Self-Regulation, Emotion, Grit, and Student Performance in Cyber Learning Environments. It's by Janice W. Kooken, Rafat Zaini, and Ivan Arroyo. Published in Metacognition and Learning back in 2021.
Right. And that's our mission for this deep dive,
Wow.
to unpack this paper, figure out how things like, self-regulation, your emotions, your persistence, your grit, how they all interact in real time when a student's using one of these online tutors.
Okay, let's get into it. So the setting for this research is an intelligent tutoring system, an ITS. The specific one they looked at is called MathSpring.
Yeah, Math Spring. Think of it like a personalized online math helper for K-12 students.
So it adapts to the student.
Exactly. It tries to tailor the learning. And critically for this study, it logs everything. Not just right or wrong answers, but how students interact, if they ask for hints, how long they take. It even prompts them about how they're feeling sometimes.
Oh, interesting. So it's trying to capture the cognitive stuff, the metacognitive, like strategy use, and even the affective, the emotional side.
Precisely. Things like adapting problem difficulty, giving hints, videos, those animated characters, the emotion prompts. It's all designed to be responsive.
Okay. And the theory they're using to frame all this is self-regulated learning, or SRL.
That's the backbone. Specifically, a model by Zimmerman and Moylan from 2009. It's a cyclical model.
Self-regulated learning.
Yeah.
Right? The idea that you actively manage your own learning.
Yeah.
So what's this cycle involve?
Well, it breaks down into three main phases, and they all connect. First is forethought.
Forethought.
Yeah, like planning, setting goals, thinking about the task, bringing in your prior beliefs like grit or how much you expect to succeed.
Okay, planning and beliefs. Then comes performance. Doing the actual work.
Exactly. You're tackling the problem, using strategies, sort of monitoring yourself, maybe asking for help like clicking a hint button in MathSpring.
Makes sense. And the last phase.
Self-reflection, looking back. Did I get it right? What did I learn? How did I feel about it? And the key thing is this reflection then feeds right back into the forethought for the next task.
So it's a continuous loop. Plan, do, reflect, which changes the next plan.
You got it. And the paper points out, while we kind of know these phases exist, understanding how the thinking, the managing of thinking, and the feelings, how they all interact as a system during learning, that's been the real challenge.
How it all works together in the moment.
Yeah, and over time. It's hard to see just by watching someone, which leads to their research method, which is pretty cool. They use system dynamics modeling.
System dynamics. Okay, that sounds like building a model of the whole interacting system.
Spot on. It's a way to map out complex systems visually with all the connections and, crucially, the feedback loops. You define stocks like levels of mastery or frustration and flows, the rates things change. It lets you simulate how tweaking one part affects everything else over time.
Okay, so they build this dynamic model based on that SRL cycle. But how do they know how strong those connections are? Like, how much does getting a problem right boost your feeling of mastery in the model?
Good question. That's where the second method comes in. Structural equation modeling, or?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Right. They used SEM to analyze the actual log data from students using MathSpring, plus some survey data they collected, like self-reported grit. SEM basically lets you test how well a proposed model of relationships fits the real data and estimate the strength, the coefficients of those connections.
I see. So the real student data tells them how strongly things are linked, and they use those numbers to calibrate their system dynamics simulation.
Exactly. It's a really smart hybrid approach. Use real data to ground the relationships, then use the simulation model to explore the dynamics. And this data came from middle schoolers using MathSpring, both in Massachusetts and Argentina, which gives it some breadth.
Okay, so they built the model, tuned it with real data.
Yeah.
What do they find? What did the simulation actually show about these dynamics? This must be where those surprising results come in.
Yes, this is the core. The big takeaway is they did successfully build and validate a model that simulates this interplay of grit, emotion, self-regulation, and performance within the ITS. It works, but the really fascinating parts are the specific feedback loops it revealed.
Okay, let's unpack some. Performance influencing evaluation like success leads to mastery. That feels pretty straightforward.
It does. Solve a problem correctly, your estimated mastery goes up in the model. And, if the difficulty stayed the same, higher mastery would predict more success later, but, and this is key, the ITS is adaptive.
Right, it gets harder as you get better. The system raises the bar.
Precisely. Math Spring bumps up the difficulty as mastery increases. So here's counterintuitive finding number 1 from the model. Higher mastery can actually predict lower success on the very next problem.
Hold on. Higher mastery leads to less success. How does that work?
It sounds wrong initially, I know, but think about it. As you master concepts, the system deliberately gives you harder problems, ones right at the edge of your current ability. Your success rate on those tougher boundary-pushing problems is naturally going to be lower than on stuff you've already got down pat.
Okay. So it's not that you're getting worse, it's that you're succeeding less often because the problems are now harder, which only happened because you're improving.
You nailed it. The model captures that reality of learning in an adaptive system. You're being challenged effectively.
That makes so much more sense now. And wasn't there a similar finding about using hints?
Yes, another counterintuitive one. More hints being associated with lower success. Again, you'd think hints help you succeed more.
Right.
But in the model's dynamic, students ask for more hints when the problems are hard. And when are the problems hardest? Often when mastery is high and the system is giving you those challenging ones. So you use more hints on the very problems you're ultimately less likely to solve successfully because they're really stretching you, sometimes beyond what hints alone can bridge immediately.
Okay, so the hints aren't necessarily failing. It's just that they're being used most on the toughest climbs.
Yeah.
Where success isn't guaranteed even with support.
Exactly. It's context. So those are some performance dynamics. Now, what about evaluation feeding back into forethought? They found a clear link from mastery to expectation of success.
That seems intuitive. As I get better, I believe more that I can succeed in the future.
Right, but it's a critical connection. Seeing yourself improve reinforces that belief. And this belief, the expectation of success, is where it gets really exciting regarding grit. The model showed that a higher expectation of success actually predicted an increase in grit over time.
Whoa, hang on. That's big. We usually talk about grit like it's just a trait you have. But this suggests experiencing success, building that belief you can do it, actually builds your persistence.
It's a powerful insight from the paper, yeah. It offers a mechanism for how learning environments themselves, if they foster that cycle of mastery and belief, could actively cultivate grit. It's not just fixed, it might be something that grows through positive feedback loops.
That really reframes grit. So expectation of success is like fuel for persistence. What about emotion, frustration, confidence?
Right.
Where did that fit in?
Also, really interesting findings there. Emotion, like feeling frustrated or confident, didn't directly predict behaviors like asking for hints or time spent, according to their model.
Really? But we know emotion matters in learning.
It absolutely does, but the model suggests it works through mediated pathways, indirect routes. For example, emotion's effect on hint seeking wasn't direct. It was mediated by grit. Meaning positive emotion tended to support grit, and then grit influenced help seeking. So the path was more like emotion, grit hints.
Okay, so emotion bolsters grit, which then changes behavior. Got it. And the link between mastery and emotion, was that direct?
Nope, also mediated. That path went. Mastery, expectation of success, emotion. Feeling confident wasn't just about having high mastery. It was about mastery boosting your belief you could succeed, and that belief then led to more positive emotions.
Wow, these mediated pathways really drive home how tangled up everything is. It's not just isolated factors. They influence each other step by step inside the learner.
Precisely. And that's the value of the simulation part. Once they had this calibrated model, they could run what-if scenarios, like what happens for an average student? What if we could magically boost emotion for a struggling student?
And what did those simulations show? What's the benefit of doing that?
The big benefit is testing potential interventions virtually. The simulations revealed those ripple effects. For instance, just trying to boost emotion directly in the simulation didn't do much for actual mastery or success. But targeting things like building mastery or boosting expectation of success did have positive downstream effects on emotion and grit through those pathways we talked about. It suggests interventions need to hit the right levers in the system.
That's hugely useful for anyone designing learning tools or teaching. So, okay, let's bring this home. For you listening, What are the main takeaways here? The so what?
Well, if you're a learner, I think this gives you a kind of map. It helps understand that your own learning journey involves this constant dance between how you regulate yourself, your feelings, your beliefs about your ability, that expectation of success, and how persistent you are, your grit. Recognizing these connections might help you manage the ups and downs, especially online.
And if you're on the other side, an educator or a developer.
Then the study gives real empirical weight to SRL theory in these digital spaces. And it highlights how crucial it is to think systemically. How can we design systems that don't just deliver content, but actively foster those positive loops, building mastery, which boosts belief, which fuels persistence and positive emotions?
It definitely shifts the focus from just information transfer to nurturing this whole dynamic internal system of the learner.
Absolutely. Though the authors are careful to point out limitations, specific student groups, the measures they used, and they call for more research, bigger studies over time, maybe adding other factors like goal orientations.
Sure, standard scientific caution. So wrapping up, this deep dive into Kooken, Zaini, and Arroyo's work really paints a picture of this complex, dynamic system inside a student learning math online. Self-regulation, emotion, grit, they're all deeply interconnected and influencing each other constantly.
Yeah, and it gave us those really thought-provoking findings, like how mastering content can lead to facing harder problems and maybe lower success at that new level, or that powerful idea that building belief in yourself through success might actually be a way to grow your grit.
It fundamentally changes how you might think about what's happening below the surface during learning. If you want to explore this more, we strongly recommend checking out the full paper. Again, it's Simulating the Dynamics of Self-Regulation, Emotion, Grit, and Student Performance in Cyber Learning Environments by Janice W. Kooken, Rafat Zaini, and Ivan Arroyo in Metacognition and Learning.
And yeah, we'll definitely put a link to the paper in the description for this deep dive so you can easily find it.
So here's a final thought to mull over. Knowing about these interconnected feedback loops, especially how belief fuels persistence, how might that change how you approach your own learning challenges? And if you die in learning, how could you build experiences that intentionally cultivate those positive cycles of mastery, belief, and grit?